Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey on a warm August Sunday night, right?
Oh my gosh, Jim. It is perfection outside, at least in West Virginia. We were swimming today, and I'm kind of a diva in the pool. It has to be walking on the surface of the sun for me to, get in and enjoy it. But it was beautiful outside. How about in New Hampshire?
Well, we actually had a Disney moment in the yard this past weekend. I'm sitting here. I work at my work table in the living room facing our picture window, and Nancy, comes running out of the back of the house and said, "There's a mother deer," and she's got a fawn with her, and they're making her way through the yard and made it down front, and it turns out, well, no, it's not a mother deer and a fawn. It's a mother deer and two fawns.
Bambi!
There we go. And Bambi 2, the sequel. But anyway, we got pictures. And do we do show notes? Because we could put the pictures of the deer in there.
Yeah, well, that's a question for Eric.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk to Eric later. But anyway, let's talk about today's show, which you dug up a fascinating topic.
Yeah, so today's show is all about Disney licensing. So that is the stuff that makes the merch machine run. And today we've got Fantastic Four showing up in the theme parks with new snacks, meet and greets, souvenirs, a recent survey that I got while I was at Disney about non-Disney brands that I noticed in the Magic Kingdom. And we're going to break down how all of that adds up to the $63 billion with a B, dollars in Disney licensed products last year. So then after that, Jim has a very interesting feature that ties to licensing. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we're gonna start right at the beginning, Lauren. How Walt and Roy, back in the day, even tried to do licensing with the Alice comedies, and then we're gonna plunge 30, 40 years forward and talk about Donald Duck Orange Juice and Peter Pan Peanut Butter.
And the way this episode actually came up was literally like driving down to Disney World and seeing like a Peter Pan peanut butter billboard. I'm like, Jim, what do you know about that? So we got a lot to cover in today's show. But first, why don't we thank our sponsor?
Absolutely. And this episode of I Want That Too is brought to you by our friends at unlockmagic.com. By the way, that's the same trusted team behind the DVC rental store and DVC resale market. So if you're planning a Disney trip, they've got the best deals on Walt Disney World tickets, including the lowest price for party tickets for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, likewise Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, and even Jollywood Nights. So whether it's your big family vacation or just a quick weekend getaway, visit unlockmagic.com to grab the best ticket deals and make your next Disney trip just a little more magical. Okay, so you were mentioning, Fantastic Four in the parks. And by the way, I have to ask, did you, I know Eric got out to see it, and I think he took Hunter and Miles, and did Lainey go? Or?
So no Miles, but Lainey went, and it was offered because I had watched, is it called Lightning Bolts? And so they kind of like tease whatever. And I was like, oh, is this the next movie? And Eric was like, no, it's something else, because I haven't watched all the Marvel movies. So I, sat that one out because Miles didn't want to go. And now, like, seeing all this cool stuff in the parks, I really want to go. And I was telling Eric, maybe even after I was working on the segment, because he suggested it, I was like, these people are like the Incredibles. why didn't you tell me? I would have gone. And he thinks that the Incredibles were kind of based on the Fantastic Four. Is that true, or is he just making assumptions here?
He is not wrong. In fact, Brad Bird supposedly really wanted to do a Fantastic Four film, but at that point, that was 2003. 2001. And to be honest, Disney and Marvel didn't get in bed together till 2009, so it was off the table. But no. By the way, you missed a fun film, and more to the point, what's so nice about Fantastic Four First Steps is literally you don't have to do any homework. It's not a question of, I missed a Thunderbolts and I didn't see this, the new series over, Ironheart over on Disney Plus. I won't know what's going on. It's like, no, you can walk into this thing cold, and it's sweet and funny, and you walk out of there going, okay, I'm ready to see another Marvel movie now, as opposed to, why did that guy say that thing?
Okay, but there have to be people like me out there that maybe haven't watched all of the Fantastic Four. We know that there's a ton of the Incredibles, but just kind of taking it back a little bit, how does the Fantastic Four play into the bigger Marvel universe?
Well, I mean, they are literally called Marvel's first family because I want to say they came on the scene in 1961. In fact, literally their first issue was Fantastic Four #1, and a lot of comic book historians point to that specific book as the launch of the Marvel Age of Comics, and again, so many of the characters we know and love today came on the scene in issues of the Fantastic Four, and led to the MCU we know today. But again, this is Disney, and nobody's better at leveraging IP than Disney, and particularly using the park.
Way.
So why don't we talk about where we can go to actually see these characters? Because that gets actually a little tricky.
Yeah, so they're I don't know. I feel like they've been doing this recently. They're leaning in hard to the IP. They're trying to make it relevant in the park through experiences, through the merch, through the snacks, souvenirs, combining the two. So this doesn't surprise me. And I didn't mention on the last show, but they had a new teal wall at Disney World for Elio. So when I saw that the Fantastic Four were actually making their way to Disneyland, I actually think I made a note that was incorrect. They are not even at the Avengers campus. They're in Tomorrowland. And so first up, as far as Fantastic Four goes. Yes. Does that make sense to you, why they would be in Tomorrowland versus Avenger Campus?
Well, okay, let me explain to you what I've heard from friends at Imagineering. Now, you got to remember, the last time that Disneyland's version of Tomorrowland was seriously updated, when they spent big dough as opposed to the bargain basement version they did in 1998. But the new Tomorrowland, the Tomorrowland on the Move, came on the scene in 1967. So a lot of the architecture, a lot of the stuff that's done in this side of the park is very 1960s future. Now, if you've seen anything from Fantastic Four First Steps, it's set on Earth 828, which is, this vaguely futuristic version of the early 1960s. And so, honestly, there's an agenda here. Lauren, the reason that the Fantastic Four are over in Tomorrowland, in fact, they are appearing in front of the Tomorrowland Theater doing a meet and greet there, very deliberate. The notion is that if this film catches the way that the folks at Marvel Studio hope they will, and more importantly, the way the Imagineers hope they will, this will finally allow them to do an update of size for Tomorrowland out in Anaheim as a celebration of the 1960s version of the future. Because the beauty part of that is, you don't have to do all that much work. It's already there.
Is it do you think it has anything with the 70th? Like, or you think it's largely because of the timetable?
Well, the 70th, we're being completely honest. The 70th, go down the street, go see the animatronic Walt. Okay, whereas the Fantastic Four first step is literally all about the potential for the future of Tomorrowland at Disneyland. That, this is more about, please let this movie be a hit. Please, let it become huge over on Disney Plus. Let little kids fall in love with Herbie and the Thing and want to come visit them. So now, mind you, what makes this complicated is that these characters cannot, and I repeat, cannot appear in Walt Disney World, and that's because of the master licensing agreement that Universal Pictures has. In fact, the only way you get to see those characters in Florida is if you go on a Disney cruise line and then the boat has to move into international waters. Only then it's like, okay, we far enough out? Okay, the Thing can come out of his cabin now. But that said, if we travel around the world, they're at Disneyland Paris, at their Walt Disney Studios Park at the Disneyland Resort, soon to be rebranded as Disney Adventure World. The Thing and Herbie are there. Likewise, the Thing and Herbie are in Hong Kong. Disney's gone global with this. And more to the point, they've also put some cool merch out there. Can you talk about that?
Yes. And so the merch that I'm going to talk about is just here in the U.S., but there are different things globally throughout the theme parks. But my favorite item of merch that I saw in the park was this clobberin' sipper. Like I said, they're really merging experiences, the snacks. Like they just know how to make the engine run. So it looks like the Thing's fist, and it has like, Jim, it's probably a part of the story. It looks like he's wearing a magic band. Which, I mean, he's not. It's just like a Fantastic Four. I don't know what he's wearing. Do you know what that is?
Well, again, and yes, they actually show it in the movie. That in fact, it's kind of a running gag that, the Fantastic Four keep almost doing an appearance on a TV show, but then their alert bracelets go off and they have to go save the city. And that's literally the Ben Grimm's alert bracelets. It's, he's supposed to go off and fight Mole Man.
Okay, folks, so it's not a magic band. But what's cool about this sipper is, I mean, one, it just looks super cool. Two, it has like a dual opening. So there are two ways to drink it. Like, we're obsessed with the Walla bottles in my house. And so it's kind of, there's the top pops off and there's a straw, and then it continues to pop up, and then you can fill it in any of the quick service restaurants. So that's available at Disneyland. And then there's this really cool Mr. Fantastic straw clip. I almost didn't include it, but I wanted you to see it, Jim. So there's a couple photos that I sent you. Is that not pretty cool for a straw clip?
It is pretty cool, but I'm just going to put this out there. The interesting thing about Fantastic Four First Steps is Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, who, again, famous for being stretchy, doesn't really do a whole lot of stretching in this movie. If anything,
really,
what's kind of cool is the work. Well, I think what you'd really like about this Matt Shankman movie is we meet Mr. Fantastic at a very interesting time in his life. He and Sue Storm have just learned they're becoming parents, and he goes from being the smartest guy in the world, and again, who can stretch, to the overwhelmed dad. In fact, I'm not going to lie to you. One of the funniest moments in this movie is when you get to see the Thing and the Human Torch and Mr. Fantastic struggling to put a child seat in a car. It's just sort of like, these superheroes can't figure out how to work the clips. This is the first relatable, superhero movie in a while.
And I seriously want to shake Eric for not telling me that I would like this, because now I'm going to see it with or without him. But I do have a question that leads into our next merch item. So on the straw clip, you see, it looks like he has a goatee and like a beard. So then we get this $89.99 figure set. It's like retro style, like a collector's set of all 4 members of the team. And he's clean shaven over here. Are these like the modern Marvel version versus the comic book version?
Okay, interesting story about that. Pedro Pascal, who plays Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, in this film. And again, remember that this is Mando. This is who Disney really, really likes working with now. And he recently made a movie where he was clean shaven and he said, I looked like I was 5. All right. And it just sort of like, he said, look, I would be happy. I love the Marvel comic books, but I am not shaving. So there is a way that Reed Richards has looked forever in the comic books and in fact in the other films. But that's like, look, if you want me to play this role, I keep the beard and the mustache. And so they kept the beard and the mustache. But on the other hand, the official license stuff that harkens back to the way Reed Richards looks in 61, that's why you've got that look, the Migos set, so to speak.
Yeah, and he looks like a blonde, like light eye. And so I'm looking at the retro set. But then if you go down to the other merch, like the pins or whatever, there's like a limited release of the, all 4. And he's got a stash in that on that pin. I think that's the only merch with their faces.
It's face it, that's the other fun thing about, we've told the story about Josh Gad and, when you work for Disney, you get the merch, that they send the box to your house. And that's the thing. Pedro Pascal, at some point, where's the stuff that looks like me? And it's like, all right, we'll do a couple of things that look like you with your beard and your mustache. So...
Well, you can get a pen and you can get the dolls. And then I think they have some individual action figures. But we can't talk about merch without talking about some apparel. So you get the standard suite of merch. You get like a tie-dye looking shirt. You get the like tumbler, the insulated tumbler, that kind of stuff. But I was super excited to see that Cakeworthy came out with a Fantastic Four line.
Brandon!
Yeah, Brandon! Yeah, we love him around here. But some of the line that Brandon created is available in the parks and on the Disney store. But if you go to cakeworthystore.com to their website, they have a load more. And we got a stash on the shirts. So really, really cool, really cool Fantastic Four merch all around. I encourage you to check it out.
Cool. Okay, moving on now. Then you mentioned earlier in the show that you got an interesting survey from Disney Parks.
Yeah, and I mean, it does kind of tie to Brandon at Cakeworthy because that business was built off of Disney licensing. So basically the organization that wants to, have a shop or whatever, they pay to use the IP from Disney. That's licensing in a nutshell. And so there are only, so many businesses and brands that are lucky enough to actually get their stuff on the Disney store. But I feel like they've been doing that more often. So I thought the timing of the survey was interesting because it seems to me like Disney is really leaning in to collabs. We talk about them all the time on the show. So this survey, the question asks, it says, looking at the list below, which companies, if any, did you notice during your visit to Magic Kingdom? So what I thought we would do is we would have a little bit of a quiz for Jim. So don't look ahead here. And I'm going to just name off some of these brands, and you can tell me if you think they're in the Magic Kingdom. And I will start with a softball for you, which is Dole.
Okay, that one's there. I've had the Dole Whip.
Yes. How about M&M's?
I would say yeah. I would say yes. I think I've actually seen them on sale in the Emporium.
Yes, and they had a huge display when we were there, and Lainey got our picture.
Okay.
All right, Pandora jewelry.
That I'm pretty sure of. I think I've actually talked about the Pandora charms, Disney-specific Pandora charms.
Yes. How about Dunkin' Donuts?
That one, I'm going to say no. Largely because, well, again, I live in New England where, you walk 5 minutes. There's a Dunkin' Donuts store. I would notice.
Okay, you're right there. So we got Starbucks and Joffrey's, clearly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
How about Pepsi?
Well, once upon a time, yes. Weren't they like the sponsors, the original sponsors of the Country Bear? But I want to say, isn't Disney World Coke specific now?
Yes, Disney World is Coke. Okay. So there's this long laundry list of brands that they wanted to know, do you remember seeing these? Which had me asking the question, why are they asking these questions? And coming from a background in, advertising and marketing, like if you can prove a heightened brand awareness, it's more recognizable, that equals a lot of value.
Okay.
So I think they're testing to see how well these sponsorships are actually working, because it also gives them leverage to go out and try to get more of these multi-million-dollar deals.
All true. In fact, just a little side story. Club 33, the ultra-exclusive restaurant at Disneyland Park, and there's various versions of the Disney World in Tokyo. Club 33 was named in honor of the 33 participants at the Disneyland Resort. The notion was these are our sponsors, our partners in this park, and we need to give them someplace special to hang out. So, those 33 companies are what led to Club 33.
Yeah, so this goes all the way back to the beginning. But basically what this all boils down to is the more that you notice these brands, the more valuable their partnership is with Disney. And then it all feeds back into the next story, which is the $63 billion in licensed products that Disney sold last year. So they're actually, this shouldn't really surprise anybody, but Disney is ranked the #1 licensor worldwide and far, far ahead of their closest competitor, which is Authentic Brands Group at $32 billion. And again, $63 billion. You'll remember that number forever. And then if we go down a couple spots, you'll see NBC Universal at $17 billion. So if you're just looking kind of at those two as a comparison, we have 63 versus 17, and I've talked about Universal specifically, that they just don't understand the machine the way that Disney does. They've perfected it.
But at the same time, remember, we're talking about, NBC Universal in the year of Jurassic World Rebirth, where when I go to Target, walk up the aisle to get my cat treats, I have to walk by all of, the little plastic dinosaurs and the small boys who are like, Mom, get me this! Disney
has held this position for years. So if you're wondering, what that includes, you have their classic IP. So you got, Mickey, Minnie, the pals, princesses, that kind of stuff. And then you have to factor in all of the modern franchises like Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, that goes into that overall number.
True.
So if we're looking at where the money is coming from as far as categories go, top category is apparel and accessories. So 70% of brands cite this as their top growth category. Then next up, we have toys and games at 54%, food and beverage, which we're going to talk about, at 52%. And if you're looking how this all ties together, that new Fantastic Four merch, Cakeworthy, those are examples of how this feeds directly into the Disney ecosystem. Like, remember, was it last episode or 2 episodes ago, you talked about the like map that you emailed me and like how all of the divisions of Disney all runs together, and like consumer products was even an area on the map from the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely. No, that Disney has, this is hardwired into what this company is today.
Yeah, and what was crazy to me is that how much Gen Z and Gen Alpha are driving sales. It kind of goes into that like Disney adult. Gen Z made up 27% and Gen Alpha made up 22%, which actually kind of makes sense because of like if you're on TikTok or like Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. So social media trends have like a really big role in that, I think of. But in collectability, like they're always coming out with something new, and if you have some type of collection, you want to make sure that you have everything.
Got it. Really, Gen Alpha? How? Of course, that would follow Gen Z. How did I not know that?
Gen Alpha does follow Gen Z.
Okay.
So just, the strategy in action, what it looks like is parks plus movies plus merch equal revenue. And they do it over and over and over again. They're putting the new characters in the parks. They have the exclusive merch and the food tie-ins. That drives licensed product sales, strengthens the brand partnerships, like the one that, we talked about in the survey. And that all flows into the $63 billion number. Jem, after the break, you're going to go and take us all the way back to the beginning, right?
That I am. But first, this.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle.
Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Shh. Hear that? Big waves are calling. Dive into refreshment with Kona Big Wave. Tropical flavor and the taste of aloha in every drop. This summer, don't just listen. Join Kona on the Big Wave Bonfire Tour. More information at konabigwave.com/bigwavemusic. Kona Big Wave. Liquid Aloha. Copyright 2025 Kona Brewing Co., St. Louis, Missouri. Mahalo for enjoying responsibly.
Abercrombie's viral denim sale is back, and Spotify listeners get an extra 15% off with code SPOTIFYAF. Abercrombie is known for their denim. With 30 to 50% off all jeans, find out how denim should fit. Shop the viral denim sale in the Abercrombie app, online, or in stores. Valid in stores and online through August 11th, 2025 in US and Canada. Excludes clearance, price reflects discount. Code valid in US and Canada through August 11th, 2025. Exclusions apply. See details online.
And we're back. Earlier part of today's show, Lauren did a terrific job of walking you through the licensing behemoth that the modern day Walt Disney Company has become. And again, remember that number, $63 billion with a B from retail sales from licensed merch back in 2024. But if we jump back 100 years to the early days of this organization, Lauren, and please remember the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio was formed October 16th, 1923. That's why the official Disney fan club is actually called D23. But just to be clear here, Walt and Roy didn't have all that much luck when it came to licensing their very first creation, which was the Alice comedies. Now, Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio made 56 of these things, which featured a live-action little girl capering with some cartoon characters. And those 56 of them were produced between October of 1923 and August of 1927. But they never had much luck licensing these things. And some of that was because Walt and Roy kept changing out the actress who was playing the title role in these comedies.
That's weird.
It is. Okay. Now, first, Virginia Davis played the part. She was in 13 of the Alice comedies. And by the way, Lauren, Virginia was only 5 years old when she started playing this role. But then, when Walt and Roy had a dispute with Virginia's mom, Miss Davis abruptly left the series in the late winter, early spring of 1925. And the Disney brothers tried to replace Virginia by bringing in Dawn O'Day, who was only 7 when she starred in, this is really the title of it, Alice's Eggplant, which released at theaters May of 1925. But mind you, this one reeler was Dawn's only appearance in the series, supposedly because Ms. O'Day had trouble, grasping the key creative conceit of the Alice comedies, which was that she was supposed to be acting and interacting with things that weren't there. Well, not yet anyway. All of Alice's animated friends would then get added in post-production by Bioworks, the master animator at Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. But anyway, Dawn O'Day doesn't work out. They bring in Margie Gay to play the role. Margie, just 6 years old. She doesn't have the issues that Dawn O'Day does. She immediately understands, okay, I stand in front of the camera. I interact with a rabbit who's not there. I got this. And she does so well in her debut short, Alice Solves the Puzzle, that she then appears in 30 more of these Alice comedies. But then, sadly, Miss Gay ages out of the role in the late winter, early spring of 1927, which is why Lois Hardwick is brought in to play the role. She's 9, a veteran. And she appears, her first short is Alice's Circus Days, and she appears in 9 more shorts before Walt and Roy pull the plug on the series. Now, to bring us back to the topic of today's show, while the Alice comedies are being shown in theaters, Roy reportedly did try to get some licensing deals going for Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. Roy supposedly met with reps from various toy companies and then tried to sell them on the idea of making and then selling an Alice in Cartoonland doll. So Roy meets with these toy companies, and the interesting part is they want to make a doll that looks like Virginia Davis, the first Alice, who has a heart-shaped face and long, blonde, curly hair. In fact, a lot of people back in the day used to compare Davis to Mary Pickford, who was, along with her then husband, Douglas Fairbanks, and her business partner, Charlie Chaplin. They were considered the first 3 Hollywood's true superstars. Anyway, I've heard a version of the story of why Virginia Davis bailed out of the Alice comedies. In fact, Lauren, not to put too fine a point on it, I heard this from Virginia herself, that what happened was Walt, Roy, and Virginia's mom were battling over the doll, as in who would get what cut of what Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio got from licensing the rights to an Alice in Cartoonland doll. And now Disney Brothers, they argued look, we invented the Alice in Cartoonland character, so we should get the lion's share of the profits for, whatever this proposed doll would generate. And Virginia's mom is like, well, wait a minute, the doll's likeness is literally going to be modeled on my child's heart-shaped face and her long golden locks, which she got from me. And so she's like, no, the Davis family, we should get the lion's share of the licensing fee. And since neither side would budge, Virginia's mom was like, all right, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. She supposedly told Walt and Roy that her daughter would would appear in no more films for Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio until this issue was resolved. And Virginia's mom thought, well, I got them over a barrel. They can't make the movies without Virginia. But then the Disney Brothers turn around and they hire Don O'Day. But again, now Virginia moms hears from friends who work at the studio, well, that kid didn't work out. Ooh, they'll be calling you soon. But then, as we mentioned early in the show, Walt and Roy find Margie Gay, who then goes on to appear in 31 Alice comedies. And this is when Virginia's mom realizes, ugh, I overplayed my hand. Interesting bend in the story. Walt never held this against Virginia herself, who, remember, isn't even 7 when this all goes down. Okay, a decade later, when Virginia has officially graduated from being a child star to being a young lady in her late teens who's still trying to break through in Hollywood now in the era of talkies, well, Walt actually hires her to do voice work on Pinocchio. You can actually hear Virginia's voice among the naughty kids who misbehave at Pleasure Island in that February 1940 Disney Studios release. And then during the war years, when things got really, really tight for Virginia and no one in Hollywood would hire her to act, Walt gives her a job in the ink and paint department at Disney Studios. And as I mentioned, I got to interview Miss Davis later in life. She actually hung in there till August of 2009, where she died at the age of 90. And Virginia told me she was always grateful for the continued kindness that Walt showed her, in spite of the way her mom had behaved back in the day. And I'm happy to report that especially the last decade or two of Virginia's life, well, this was when fan conventions like Comic-Con came up out of the ground, and there were animation film festivals, and it meant that, in her 70s and 80s, she became a celebrity again. She traveled the world and met all of these people. Aww. And got to tell the story that long before there was a Mickey Mouse or a Donald Duck, she was Walt Disney's first star. Though you'll love this. The kicker to this licensing related story, Virginia's mom got the last laugh. So, again, after Virginia Davis and Don O'Day left the Alice comedies, Roy continues to meet with toy manufacturers, again, about, the popular series, Alice in Cartoonland, let's get a doll going. And so the toy manufacturers will go, okay, I'm going to go to my local theater and check it out. And they'd go and watch an Alice comedy, and they'd then get on the phone to Roy and go, nope, not interested. And here's why, Lauren. Because Margie Gay and Loris Hardwick, the two young ladies who played the title role in the Alice comedies after Virginia Davis and Don O'Day left the series, they were brunettes. And not only that, but they had the bob haircuts that were very fashionable in the mid to late 20s. And according to the toy manufacturers, it's like, no, little girls aren't interested in brunette dolls, especially brunette dolls with the bob haircut. The dolls that sold best were the blondes with the long curly locks. And to be honest, the dolls that really sold well were the ones that looked exactly like Virginia Davis did back in the day. And all right, weird little bend on this story. If we jump ahead now 60 years to when the Walt Disney Company is now meeting with toy manufacturers about possibly licensing The Little Mermaid, which again, it doesn't get into theaters in November of 89. So it's Tyco that cuts the deal to make the Ariel dolls. But then, once they have the deal at hand, the people at Tyco go to Disney Consumer Products and go, well, because redhead dolls don't historically sell all that well, we're going to make Ariel's hair blonde. So Ron Clements, the co-director of The Little Mermaid, he made that film with John Musker. He still tells the story about, he's like, no. And so Disney and Tyco go back and forth on this issue until, as a compromise, and you'll love this, Lauren, they agree, okay, the first round of Ariel dolls will have strawberry, blonde hair. So it's you mix the red hair with the blonde hair, the blonde strands. And those today,
That blows my mind.
Well, more to the point, these are the most highly sought after, highly praised Little Mermaid related collectibles. Because again, once the movie came out and, became this huge hit, of course, the next wave of dolls, it's like, well, absolutely, she's got red hair. So it was only that run that had the strawberry blonde. But anyway, that was Walt and Roy's first adventure in licensing, but it wouldn't be the last. And when we get back from this break, we're now going to talk about how under Walt's watch, Donald Duck started hawking orange juice and Peter Pan wound up on the side of a peanut butter jar. But first, this.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love, starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
And we're back. So Lorna and I were just talking about the troubles that Walt and Roy had when they tried to license the Alice comedies. They got a little better at this whole licensing thing when Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, when he made his debut in September of 27. Oh, did you see the news last month about how Jon Favreau is doing a new Oswald the Lucky Rabbit series for Disney Plus?
No, I don't think I did. I know there was recently one, but not a new one that is now coming.
Yeah, well, this is supposed to be a modern-day Roger Rabbit, in that it's about a bunch of middle schoolers from today who befriend and have adventures with this black and white cartoon bunny from the 1920s. So, and I trust me, in a year's time, you and I will be talking about the tidal wave of Oswald merch that we'll be seeing coming from Disney Parks, experiences, and products. Speaking of which, out ahead of that, we need to bring Noah Valladolid on the show. He's the co-host of Manufacturing the Magic, that theme park history show we host here at Jim Media. And Noah has this absolutely stunning collection of Oswald stuff. It's stuff that goes all the way back to the 20s and the 30s, when this thing was initially licensed. And I bet, out ahead of the Jon Favreau thing, people would really be interested in that. So, all right. Anyway, speaking of the 1920s, Mickey Mouse officially arrives on the scene in 1928. And now, finally, Walt and Roy have a handle on this merchandising thing. In fact, the very first thing that Disney Brothers Cartoon Studios officially licenses with the company's new character on it is a children's writing tablet. And Lauren, you'll love this story. It's early 1929, and a man comes up to Walt in the lobby of a hotel and says, I'll give you $300 cash money right now if you give my company the right to produce a writing tablet for kids with Mickey Mouse on the front of it. And now you got to understand, this is when money is really tight height at Disney Brothers Cartoon Studios. 6 months earlier, Charles Mintz had stolen Oswald out from under Walt and Roy, and he'd poached most of the studio's best animators to come work with him on new Oswald shorts. So Walt's back is against the wall. So he agrees to the deal on the spot. He shakes the man's hand. He hands Walt the $300 in cash, and Walt now has to go find a payphone to call his brother and explain. Because again, Roy handled all of the business, and to go, I just made a deal with a guy I ran into in a hotel lobby, and he gave me money, which doesn't sound shady at all.
He gave me $300.
There we go. That's professional show business right there, folks. Okay, but this is the part of the Walt Disney story that the modern Disney company just really does not like to talk about. How, the guy whose name is on the side of the building, when backed into a corner, would make a quick deal for some badly needed cash. I mean, a case in point, it's 1940. And Walt Disney has just spent most of the immense amount of money that Snow White had generated during its initial theatrical release on the construction of the world's first state-of-the-art, purpose-built, from the ground up, modern animation studio. Unfortunately, as Walt is spending all of this recently earned cash, doing things like buying 51 acres of land in Burbank. By the way, got it for a steal, $10,000, but this was 1938. Meanwhile, over in Europe and Asia, we're slowly sliding into World War II, which means that foreign film markets, which is where Disney-produced films were doing especially well, because think about it, animation is a visual medium. I mean, it means you don't have to translate when Pluto accidentally steps on a piece of flypaper or Donald Duck has a tantrum. Anyway, these foreign film markets seriously starting to dry up in 38 and 39, which means that the money that Walt used to count on from overseas ticket sales, that also is drying up. And at the moment when all of the bills for constructing this new Disney studio are coming due, and at the same time, remember, Walt is now making, 3 very, very ambitious and expensive films, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Bambi, as his follow-up to Snow White. So, 1940 rolls around, and Disney Studios having some very serious cash flow problems, which is why when the Florida Citrus Canners Cooperative comes a-callin' in the spring of that same year, 1940, and says, we'd like to license Donald Duck for a new brand of frozen orange juice. We're thinking of bringing it to the market. Walt cannot say yes fast enough. I mean, mind you, Donald's relatively new at this point. I mean, he's only 6 years old. He comes on the scene in The Wise Little Hen, Silly Symphony, first released by Disney in June of 34. And I mean, Donald isn't even the star of this thing. He's a supporting character along with Peter Pig, who looks like Porky's older, more athletic brother. So, anyway, the Duck makes a big enough impression that by January of 37, he's got his own series of shorts. And now, mind you, Mickey's still the big muckety-muck on the lot. He's the one who stars in Sorcerer's Apprentice, not Donald. But as 37 gives way to 38, 39, 40, the Duck's popularity is growing and growing. And so Walt isn't surprised that the Florida Citrus Canners Cooperative wants to license Donald for their new frozen orange juice product. To be honest, he's just grateful that they showed up with a sizable check when they did. And that deal, Lauren, was what helped keep the lights on at Disney Studio during the war years. Though, interesting bend on the story, Citrus World, and by the way, that's the name that the Florida Citrus Canners Cooperative changed its name to in 1969, supposedly because Disney World was just opening down the street from their Lake Wales headquarters. So it's like, okay, it's Disney World. We're going to be Citrus World. Anyway, Citrus World holds on to the license for Donald Duck orange juice for the next 58 years. And they only decide to let it go in 1998 because, well, by then, frozen orange juice is fallen out of favor and what consumers seem to really be responding to then is, fresh stuff, natural stuff. So, first of all, this is why the Florida Citrus Canners Cooperative now changes its name from Citrus World to Florida's Natural Growers. And they dropped Donald Duck orange juice at the time, because it's old-fashioned. And they almost immediately after sales fall through the floor admit, oh, God, we just made a huge mistake. In fact, such a huge mistake, Lauren, that after a lengthy negotiation and then paying way more than they really wanted, Citrus World, the parent company of the Florida Natural Growers brand, reacquires the licensing rights to Donald Duck orange juice. But it took till 2017. So over 20 years, or damn near 20 years. And
wow, and they probably paid a mint to get it back.
They did. And the interesting part is, even today, you can go into a dollar store and get Donald Duck orange juice. And we talked about Peter Pan peanut butter. Another kind of funny story. All right. Derby Foods, through its EK Pond subsidiary, they began producing peanut butter over 100 years ago. In fact, their commercially produced peanut butter initially hits the market in 1915. Now, Swift acquires Derby Foods. And, they're looking at what they consider the lagging sales for their peanut butter brand. And like, all right, what can we do to turn this around? All right, let's rename it. First they call it Yankee Peanut Butter. And then they call it Toyland Peanut Butter. And again, this is how people in marketing used to think in the day. It's like, well, kids go to the store with their parents, and they'll be there in the aisle, and they'll look up and go, Toyland. It's like, Mom, I want the peanut butter that's made in Toyland. But that still doesn't move the needle. But now, on a parallel course, Peter Pan, the character, comes on the scene in J.M. Barrie's book, The Little White Bird, initially published in 1902. Barrie takes this character, makes him the center of a stage play. Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, that premieres in London in 1904. It does so well, it's so hugely popular that Barrie actually takes his stage play and turns it into a novel, Peter and Wendy, which gets published in 1911. That book's a big seller, so much so that in the Hollywood tradition, they come a-calling, they acquire the movie rights to Peter Pan. And it's Paramount Pictures who eventually makes a big-budget, live-action, silent movie version of the story, starring Betty Bronson in the title role. And that gets released to theaters in 1924. Enormous success, plays for years. Okay. So if we pivot back now to those executives at Swift who were trying to convince shoppers to buy Toyland peanut butter brand, and one of these executives goes to see Betty Bronson in the Peter Pan movie that Paramount made, and he comes back to the office and says, I got an idea. Let's move our peanut butter brand from Toyland to Neverland. And I think if we start calling our peanut butter Peter Pan peanut butter, then it will finally sell. So they do it. 1928. And Swift, which, by the way, eventually gets acquired by the Post Company, they rebrand Toyland peanut butter as Peter Pan peanut butter. And for a while, sales soar, which is appropriate because Peter Pan flies. All right. Jump ahead 25 years. Sales of Peter Pan peanut butter have become stagnant. But again, problem here is that the way Post is depicting the character Peter Pan on the side of their peanut butter jar is just like they used to do in the stage play and even in that silent movie version that Paramount made with Betty Bronson. And that is, Peter Pan is depicted as a woman dressed as a young boy, which now, according to Post's own...
I remember that.
There we go. But here's the thing. Post's own research indicates that this is somewhat off-putting to small boys who, by the way, are the biggest consumers of peanut butter sandwiches. You know, that they supposedly come into the kitchen, they look at the fully grown woman dressed as a boy on the side of the jar and go, Mom, can I have a bologna sandwich instead? You know, I'm conflicted. But anyway, all right. It's this in the exact same window of time that people at Post learned that Walt Disney Productions is readying a full-length animated version of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, which will arrive in theaters February of 1953. And from the early posters that are already out there for this film, they know, okay, in the new Disney movie version, Peter Pan will be depicted as a boy. Not a lady dressed as a boy, but a boy. And so, the folks at Post, they called to Burbank. They asked for a meeting with Walt to discuss, all right, could we license your version of Peter Pan to put on the side of our jar of peanut butter? But here's the thing, Lauren. What the people at Post don't know is at this exact same moment in time in Disney company history, Walt is scrambling, trying to find the money necessary to build that family fun park that he's always dreamed of doing. And remember, this is early 53. It's not going to be till September of that same year, 53, that Roy finally meets with executives at ABC and secures that first round of financing, which then makes Disneyland, it goes from being a dream to reality. So picture this. You're an executive from Post. You sit down with Walt and you start your pitch. You're like, we were wondering if you might be willing to consider letting us license your version of Peter Pan to use the new face of our now 25-year-old Peter Pan peanut butter brand. And Walt doesn't even let them finish the pitch. He's like, yes, absolutely. And we'll throw in Tinkerbell for free. The kicker to this story is Post is a very frugal company. And so many labels with the lady version of Peter Pan have been produced in advance that it actually takes them a couple of years to burn through their stockpile. But on the other hand, the very first commercials on the air for Peter Pan peanut butter after the steal, Tinkerbell is front and center. She's there for virtually every ad. Not only that, Lauren, but Cliff Edwards, Ukulele Ike, the original voice of Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio. He'd been doing this voice for the studio since the late 30s, early 40s. He's the off-screen narrator for these ads. And then when Cliff eventually gets too old and infirm for this Peter Pan gig, he dies in July of 71 at the age of 76. The off-screen announcer for, again, this continuing series of TV commercials, the role is then passed off to Sterling Holloway, who's the voice actor who originally did the Cheshire Cat for Disney's Alice in Wonderland, but better known today as the original voice of Winnie the Pooh for the Disney featurette.
Oh.
And the thing is, the animation that was done originally for all these ads was actually done by real Disney animators. You could not have had a more Disney promoted product than the Peter Pan ads from this era, but anyway, long story short, that's a look back at the history of licensing of the Walt Disney Company, which you get behind the scenes, folks, sometimes a lot more desperate than you might think.
And that answers my original question from my trip is, how did Peter Pan get on the side of a peanut butter jar?
Walt wanted money. Walt wanted money to build his park down in Anaheim. So honestly, if at that point, if the Post Company had showed up and we want to put Dumbo on the side of a sardine can, absolutely, sure, go ahead. Whatever got money coming in the door, they would have done.
Well, that is fascinating, I must say. But on that note, I do think that it's time we close up shop for today.
Okay. Well, by the way, folks, if you want to keep up on everything happening across the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, please follow us on social. And don't forget to check out our Patreon for bonus shows and early access.
I know. I was just watching some Test Track last night. Fantastic. Highly recommend everybody checks that out. And if you like today's episode of I Want That Too, consider leaving us a quick review. It really helps more people find us and helps the channel.
Cool. Oh, and if you have a question or an idea for a future episode, please feel free to shoot us a message. I can be reached at jim@jimhillmedia.com, and Lauren can be reached at lauren@laurenhersey.com.
Yep, that does it for today's episode of I Want That Too. We'll see you next time.